Welcome to the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis. Join hosts Aaron Smith and Jimmy Young as they dive into the pulse of the cannabis industry, featuring weekly guests who break down big topics like standardization, evolving regulations, and exclusive member spotlights. Get informed, get inspired. And now, here are your hosts, Aaron and Jimmy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the debut of The Voice of Cannabis, presented by our friends from Buds Group. And of course, this is the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis. I am Pro Cannabis Media founder, Jimmy Young.
And I'm Aaron Smith, co-founder and CEO of the National Cannabis Industry Association.
Great to be working with you, Aaron. I want to know right off the bat, if you could just give us a little background on how the NCIA was formed, since you were the founder, you were there, and what's it doing now and how is it doing now? Go ahead.
It's always great to be working with you, and really excited about this new podcast that we're getting off the ground this month. And NCIA exists to represent the small businesses that make up the heart of the cannabis industry. We started in 2010, back when adult use was still just kind of a glimmer of hope out there on the horizon, but we didn't have any states that had adult use legalization yet. We did have a medical cannabis industry thriving at that time in a number of states. And my co-founder, Steve Fox, and I decided that there needed to be a voice for these businesses on Capitol Hill. Every single industry has a trade association or more than one trade association representing their political interests in DC. And it just made sense that NCIA needed to fill that gap that didn't exist for cannabis by being able to talk about banking issues, tax issues, all of those business issues that are really unique to the cannabis industry. And remember, we fast forward to today, we now represent nearly 500 businesses, primarily small independent operators that are unable to hire their own K Street lobbyists, but work with us to ensure that their voices are heard.
Hey, I even know where K Street is. I think I got a ticket there once. Anyway, that's in DC, and that's where everything happens as far as our government goes, if anything ever is going to happen. And Aaron, you and I have talked. To me, every lobbyist in America in the cannabis space should put in for hazardous duty pay, because now that there's another administration in place, your jobs became much harder with the transfer. Am I right?
Yeah, it's a little bit like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. That's sort of how we've been managing to move progress along over the years. And the new administration does pose some challenges, but I think there's opportunities as well. Right now, one thing that's we're up against a government that doesn't get a lot done, and that's just going to be difficult no matter what issue you're advocating for.
That's right. And you know what? They have a whole bunch of stuff on the plate right now, let's just say, and try to leave the rest of that out. I don't want this to be a blame game or anything like that. It is one thing in the government of the United States of America, it's never moved fast. And when it comes to cannabis, I call it cannabis standard time, Aaron. 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, or 2 steps forward, 1 step. It just takes a longer because the priority is bigger in the industry than it is with our elected officials. Accurate?
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the current administration. I think we're in week 13 right now. So, we tariffs, the wars in Israel and Europe. I mean, there's a lot of priorities in front of the administration and the new Congress. And cannabis, it's frankly not at the top of mind for most members of Congress or the administration. And that's why it's so vitally important that businesses who stand to lose or gain from the work that we're doing get involved, because there's thousands of lobbyists, hundreds of issues that are swirling around in DC at any given time, and it's our job to push our issue up to the top or nearer the top of that priority list, and that's what NCIA is here to do. And we really implore anybody listening who's in the cannabis industry, cares about this issue, to get involved. Contact your member of Congress, join associations, make sure that your voice is somehow heard and that your will is being registered through that democratic process. And believe it or not, it works.
You're not just an advocate, you're a business. You have to do both. That's really what's so important. And an organization like the NCIA is in the trenches in the halls, making it happen down in Washington, D.C. What we're going to do with our little format here every week, and we're going to have a new episode every week as we release it here, as well on Pro Cannabis Media's YouTube channel, and also websites and our distribution network, and of course, all the NCIA social media platforms as well. And every week we'll have a different set of guests coming in. And yes, we are going to profile some of the NCIA memberships. Okay, so that's kind of an intro, if you will, a little preview of what's coming up. And Aaron, you and I both have the 6 topics we're going to tackle right now. So let's get right to the chase, shall we? And let's give it an update on what's going on with the rescheduling situation. We know that it went to the point where it was being a hearing at the DEA, and then the administration's changed. There's a whole bunch of stuff and finger pointing about, they're putting prohibitionists in place, but they're not giving the industry a voice. So I guess my question is rescheduling now a DEA responsibility, or can the DOJ actually intervene here?
Well, it's DEA or Congress. That's sort of the way that the law is set up. The Controlled Substances Act allows the DEA to move forward with rescheduling or even descheduling cannabis, which would be our preference. Or Congress can pass a bill. I don't think Congress is likely to pass a bill on this issue right now, but there is a recommendation on the table from the Health and Human Services Administration to move cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. And of course, that happened in the previous Biden administration. We had a series of hearings set up, but then unfortunately, the process was completely stalled out after an appeal was filed by actually an allied organization alleging they were alleging some serious allegations around the DEA's clear reluctance to actually move forward with rescheduling. It was very clear that this was coming from the top, from the president, Biden at the time, the DOJ to move rescheduling forward when there are career DEA agents that didn't want, or DEA staff that didn't want to do that. So, but that said, it's been about 90 days since the appeal was granted, and we had this indefinite stay. We're still waiting on a new DEA administrator, Cole, to be sworn in. Well, he's been appointed, but not confirmed. And I think after confirmation, which should be in the coming weeks or near future here, I think we can get this process back on its feet. That the president did in the campaign support rescheduling, and even beyond that. And I think that it's up to us to make sure he makes good on that.
Is it possible for him, President Trump, to make an executive order and just say, we're going to accept what the HHS said last year as a recommendation, and kind of take the DEA out of it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know kind of technically if you could say he's taking the DEA out of it, but ultimately the DEA reports to the Department of Justice, which has the Attorney General presiding over that, and the Attorney General reports to the President. So yes, I think in short, I think the President could send an edict, whether it be an executive order or just saying, hey, you're going to do this, and they would ultimately need to move forward with it. And I would not put it out of the realm of possibility. That's probably likely what's going to happen, because there is clearly resistance within the DEA to rescheduling, which is understandable given they've been working under prohibition since the beginning. That's why they exist. They don't want to cede any kind of power that they have, I think, in that area. So it's going to need to come from the top, and that's where it started under the previous administration. I think we're going to see the same approach now, and I think it's important for those that are close to the president or have any influence over the kind of Republican politics to remind them that this is something that both parties support, but Biden failed to get done, and so this is the opportunity for Trump to shine and get it done.
And those commercials by the Political Action Committee are reminding the president that he did say this, and hopefully that can move the needle a little bit. But you know what? We'll have to see what happens, because nobody knows what's ever going to happen out of the White House these days. That being said, let's get into the 280E thing, because if cannabis is rescheduled to Schedule 3, which has been discussed for months, if not years, before President Biden was got beat and was left to go out to pasture, if you will. The 280E is a strangling thing for the industry. However, some of the bigger companies, some of the MSOs have cut deals in their own states now to avoid those 280E things, and actually some of them are actually getting money back. So how important is it for it to be rescheduled so that 280E goes away?
That is the number one issue. I think that is holding the industry back from being able to really truly thrive. And is this 280E provision that prevents businesses from taking ordinary deductions. Now, rescheduling would not make marijuana legal. It would move it from 1 to 3, which kind of changes the legal status from, somewhere like LSD to something more like ketamine. And so still illegal unless it's purchased with a prescription and very tightly controlled. But moving from Schedule 1 to 3 or below, 3, 4, 5, would eliminate the burden of 280E because that's just the way this law was implemented. So that's one of the reasons I think that we really need to push for rescheduling, as well as any legislation in Congress that could address 280E. Right now, a big issue for NCIA and a big priority for us is defeating bad legislation that has been introduced in the House and the Senate that would enshrine 280E into law, regardless of the cannabis, what schedule cannabis is under federal law. And this is a legislation that has been, could sneak into a budget bill, could be passed in the late night session in Congress. So we really need to make sure that our members of Congress know that this bill's out, our allies in Congress know this bill's out there and are ready to defeat it.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is safe banking, and as someone who has been debanked not once but twice, I'd like to know what the heck is going on with that. Is there any hope at all of that being tagged onto an amendment of any of these bills that the Congress is looking at now, or because it is Republican-controlled politics, the banking thing, which I thought should actually attract the Republican Party, is we're going to have to live with this for a few more months, years, if not decades.
Yeah, well, this is one of the issues that does enjoy the most bipartisan support in Congress and probably among the voters as well. And certainly, with law enforcement stakeholders really don't want to see these businesses operating in this all cash or cash heavy environment. It causes the retailers to be magnets for crime when they don't need to be. It causes a difficulty for regulators to have the transparency in the financial transactions that they would like to see. So really nobody stands to gain from the banking situation as it is. To answer your question, we've had the Safe Banking Act introduced year after year. It's passed the House now several times, has stalled in the Senate, even when we had a Democratic majority in the Senate, unfortunately. So it is an uphill battle. That said, because of the support that it has, because the president has also acknowledged his support for such a policy, I do think there's opportunities in the coming year I don't think we'll see Safe Banking Act pass on its own. I don't think that House leadership or Senate leadership would bring that to a vote because it would shine a lot of attention on this marijuana issue that they tend to kind of want to avoid. But that doesn't mean that the underlying policy couldn't be attached to another financial services bill. And there's legislation that's expected to come through dealing with financial services, dealing with crypto. And those are going to be opportunities for us as the industry's lobbyist and advocate to try to insert safer banking policy into any of that legislation.
There you go. And under the role of executive producer, not just of this particular show, but also the Cannabis Coast to Coast news show that we produce every week, I'm going to edit here. And we're not going to talk about number 4. We're going to go right to number 5, because I think the issue about hemp versus Delta-9 cannabis needs to be addressed. Texas is out of control right now. They had a hearing in the House Oversight Committee last week where the U.S. Hemp Roundtable had their attorney there and did a great job, and actually part of our news this week. That being said, what's the future? How are both sides of the plant here in two different industries, one regulated, one unregulated? Are we ever going to find the time where we have one regulatory body focused on the cannabis sativa plant?
Yeah, I mean, the future is this is a cannabinoid industry. This isn't a cannabis industry and a hemp industry. we represent a broader cannabinoid industry. And that means that we need to have federal and state laws that treat cannabinoids equally, regardless of how they're produced. Unfortunately, under the current system, we have federally legal yet unregulated at the federal level anyway, hemp products. And then you have federally illegal and very highly regulated at the state level marijuana products. And we need to find parity between these two sides of the industry. And for NCIA, what that parity means is a little bit less regulation on the state level for marijuana and probably a bit more for hemp. And then also legalizing it at the marijuana-derived cannabinoids at the federal level and laying out the groundwork for federal regulations. I think in the interim, we're going to see a fight over the Farm Bill because there will be efforts, including some within our own industry, trying to roll back hemp legalization in the Farm Bill, and that's something that we're going to oppose. But we're going to be pushing for regulation of hemp. There was a legislation introduced by Senator Wyden last year that we'll expect to see again this year that lays out some really standard common sense things: testing, age gating, labeling, to try to get that parity that we're looking for.
Absolutely. And control and safety. I got to tell you, what's going on in Oregon with all the violence against cannabis grows and cannabis dispensaries is kind of disgusting to me, because it just doesn't make any sense that law enforcement will allow that to happen at this point in time, especially in Oregon, one of the earliest states to adapt adult use. The last thing I have on here on our agenda is the race to the number state 25. Who's going to be the state that puts over half the states now with adult use legalization in America? Is it going to be Pennsylvania, Aaron?
I think all signs indicate that there's a good chance it will be Pennsylvania. There's also efforts underway in Hawaii that are looking really good for advocates, and in Wisconsin and elsewhere. But I think if I were to put money on it, it would be Pennsylvania. And this, the governor has made it a priority. Governor Shapiro has made this a priority. It looks like the state house is bringing it up for a vote in the coming weeks, and it looks like the support is there. They have entertained proposals that would require state-run cannabis stores in the past, which is something I think is a ill-conceived way to move forward with legalization. But I'm optimistic that a workable bill will pass, and it's exciting because Pennsylvania is going to be a big market, but from a political standpoint, there's only 6 or 7 states that really get a lot of attention in the presidential election every 4 years. The swing states, the battleground states. Pennsylvania is the biggest among them, and so we already have in those states. We have Nevada, we have Arizona, we have Michigan that are also states of legal cannabis. It'll be great to add Pennsylvania with its, I think, 19 electoral votes to that mix, and I think it really helps make this a national issue. In the same way that, whether you like it or not, the coal industry has kind of an outsized influence over presidential politics, doesn't it? Because of where coal is sourced in these battleground states. And I think with the same type of thing could be seen for cannabis.
Absolutely. All right, Aaron Smith, the Executive Director of the National Cannabis Industry Association. I'll tell you, that's our first kind of rapid fire episode 1 of the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis, which is now presented by Buds Group. And you can learn more about Buds Group as you continue to follow this podcast, because every week on Wednesdays, we'll be releasing a new episode. And Aaron, I know you know the next guest on episode 2, Jillian. She's in the regulation department. Tell us a little bit about who she is and why regulators are so important in this industry.
Yeah, well, so the cannabis industry is one of the most heavily regulated industries at the state level out there. And Jillian Schauer, who represents CANRA, the Cannabis Regulators Association, will be on to discuss the work that they're doing to try to balance regulations to protect public health, but also foster a successful industry. And also, she'll be providing kind of a sneak peek of a larger conversation that will be happening in Washington, D.C. in May for our lobby days. Jillian and some of the regulators from the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area will also be in attendance to connect with the industry, because they want to hear from us, and it's important for them to hear the issues that the industry are facing.
Absolutely. And I'll be there too. I'm sure that's going to be a big driver for you, but I will be there too. We'll have special on location interviews and stories. But that's going to wrap up our episode 1 of the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis presented by Buds Group. And I am PCM TV founder Jimmy Young. And wait till you get a hold of episode 2 with Jillian, because that's coming up next week. Thanks for watching, and remember, like, share, and subscribe to the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis.
Thank you.
We focus solely on the cannabis space. The cannabis is not just another item that we've put on our website and said, oh, we're in cannabis. We do cannabis and cannabis only, and we focus on cannabis day in and day out. So with Buds Group, we're going to not only work with you and give you advice, we're going to help see your project through to completion. And you're going to find at the end of the day, it'll be a fraction of a cost of working with a larger firm, because our executives are focused just on cannabis and we run lean.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.
That's a wrap on this episode of the NCIA's Voice of Cannabis. If you liked what you heard, smash that like and subscribe button, follow us on your favorite platform, and share this episode with your network. We've got more industry movers, shakers, and game changers coming your way every week. So don't miss a beat. Tune in next time for another fresh episode with Aaron and Jimmy.